Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For you today, world-class photographer Chris Howe has come the entire way to Montana from Wales, United Kingdom, in order to share some experiences from his remarkable life. A few years ago, I used to work with a very grouchy guy at work, and when he was criticizing his wife, who he deemed a gold digger, he used to say, "Behind every successful man is the woman who made it necessary." In contrast, for today's speaker, I'm of the opinion that behind this successful man is the woman who made it possible. Her name is Judith Calford. Judith is Chris's co-worker, co-owner, co-producer, teammate, soulmate, and together they have made some of the most unforgettable underground images that have ever been published. On a typical expedition, Chris will be in front of the camera. Judith will be sloughing heavy, bulky, and yet delicate equipment through all manner of nasty, wet, muddy crawlways. Then she rearranges herself into an extremely attractive and very skilled photo model. The results that they have achieved are truly unbelievable. In addition to their cave photography, Chris and Judith co-own and co-operate a publishing house called Wild Places. This is their own venture, which concentrates on publications about caving, mountain hiking, and similar extreme sports that celebrate an active and healthy lifestyle. As only one example, Chris edits and Judith co-produces the caving magazine entitled Descent, certainly one of the most widely read and one of the most beautiful caving magazines on the planet. Thank you for coming today. Please enjoy your afternoon with famous photographer, prolific publisher, terrific guy, witty individual, a great friend, and your 2018 NSS Luminary, Mr. Chris Howe.
I am really not used to being in front of any sort of camera like that. But it is a real honour, and thank you for inviting me here, for having me. And it's wonderful to look around and see so many faces that I can recognise and know. When I was asked to do this, I really was hesitant. I put off answering for a long time because there's so many people that have been luminaries, and I'm looking at them thinking, gosh, they've found stuff, they've explored stuff, they've mapped stuff, they've done stuff. I've taken some photos, and that's kind of it, really. I didn't know how to structure this. I really didn't know how to get into it. So, with a few photos just as introductions for saying it's been a wonderful excuse taking photos to be able to go around the world and see incredible things. You've already heard how Judith is so supportive. I've got to say, I wouldn't be here now. These pictures wouldn't be taken without Judith. These ones were taken in France. This is in Italy. And France again. We've been playing with underwater lighting. This was done as part of original exploration in Meghalaya last year, Meghalaya in India. And that was a wonderful period because this section of passage is one that we were first into. There was a survey team and a photo team, and we were leapfrogging. And we got to be the lucky ones and get into this first. So it's nice to be able to do photos in something that is original. This is back home in Wales. I don't think they had much imagination when they named this, because this is the big chamber near the entrance. That's its name. Gaping Gill, which you may well have heard of, the north of England, with its waterfalls pouring in. That's a daylight shaft with the blue. But chronologically, where did this all start? And I'm going to start a story here, because I don't know how to approach this other than saying, hey, here's a bit of my life. And it's going to start in the north of England, with the collieries of the north. The guy over on the left is my grandfather. He was a collier, a coal miner. And yeah, the red one, that's me. I find it embarrassing to even see that. You can see the haircut even then. The pouch around my waist is a camera. And it is true that I was born at an early age, and I didn't actually have a camera right at the start. I can't work out when I first had one, but going through my father's photos like this, I couldn't find any that I didn't have a camera. That was what I started with. Good old box brownie, and very soon after that, another one of me. The camera's actually out. That's my mother. This is the local chemist shop in the village where I can't say grew up, because I've attempted to never do so. The heading there is for green. In the day that I lived there, it was called Wards. And the left-hand door was for the chemist and photographic supplies. And he was great, because upstairs there were the deep developing tanks where you put long rolls of film through, and he used to let me go up there as a child and mess around with these tanks. And he kind of took me under his wing, as my father did, who was keen amateur photographer, and he used to swap cameras out on me. So this is another early one that I had, and it went caving for a while. By the time I got properly into starting to do cave photography, I used these a lot. This could have been a talk, a whole hour, based around the theme of cameras I have destroyed. Rolle's wonderful little cameras. As we go through all the pictures that are coming, bear in mind that all the old ones, all the black and white ones, are likely to have come off one of these. Not that one. You can see it's got a sort of neoprene sleeve. That lens clicks and rotates and collapses back in. But I just pumped mud back into the mechanism, so it always remained out, which meant also it always got crushed. I moved on to Olympus Cameras. So some of the more recent film-produced pictures were on Olympus. You can see a C written on the one. I used to carry two cameras all the time. Black and white negs in one, colour slide in the other. We used to make our own kit as well. You couldn't buy decent, small, or even operational slave units. Slave units, those not in photography, instead of having a human slave running around carrying your flash guns, you have electronic, so that you can transmit a signal and say, hey, go flash. This is essentially a homemade flash gun. The end there, the transparent end right down the bottom, was made by casting resin in a big test tube with a small test tube inside it. And then you polish it up and fix it in the end. The red bit is a magnet on a rotating sleeve. So you pulled the magnet over the right bit and it turned the whole kit and caboodle on, and then this fired flash bulbs underwater or wherever you wanted it. It was mostly developed for Martin Farr's early underwater photography, but I got the good bit, I got to use them as well. These days I'm using old Metz flash guns with a radio trigger. These are big, bulky, heavy, but utterly reliable, and more than anything, incredibly cheap. You can get these for, I don't know, $30 on eBay instead of the $500-600 that they used to cost. But they're incredibly powerful. So this is what, thankfully, Judith lugs around for me. I lug the camera about, Judith carries these. And this is the camera that I use underground. I know a lot of people are switching over to small, lightweight cameras. I'm using a Canon 5D. So anything more recent that you see coming up comes off one of these. And just so that you've got some idea of where we're talking about, South Wales, this is where Judith and I live, about here. These red blobs, and I know they should be blue, but the red blobs are all the limestone areas. Oxford there is where there was an attempt to bring me up. And some of my early photographs are things like this. So I can't work it out, but I think I was probably about 8 when I took this. When I was at school as a young teenager, I was lucky enough to be taken on an outdoor pursuits course. So this meant, in those days, a month in the Lake District in the north of England, and in winter going out walks roped up. This is a big lake in the bottom with ice on it. And it introduced me to the outdoors. And I'm so thankful for that change in my life that was introduced by essentially school teachers. This is one of my a biology field course that I was on. With the school, we had to run transects, so you count the plants, count the animals, throw quadrats around and count the plants and count the animals. My God, it was boring. It really was. We were staying residentially in the north of England, in Yorkshire. And you can see 2 buses there. There was the biologists, of which I was one, in the bus at the back. The bus at the front, that was kind of exciting. They were the geographers. They were going to a cave. And that sounded more fun, so I sneaked in the back and hid. And that way, I managed to go to a cave. So there is my first cave that I went to, and my first cave photo, which was shot with a flashbulb and a simple camera, but that was where it started for me. From there, we got hooked. Some friends and I used to travel from Oxford down to Mendip, a couple of hours on a little putt-putt motorbike. And you can see our motorbike helmets there with bolted on bits and pieces and painted pieces. And that's me again. There's no more of me after this. And that's the camera bag wading through the water. Again, another first for me. Still at school, but this was my first published photograph in the local newspaper. I was into other sports, surfing. Whoop. Go back one. This is kayaking out on the coast near where we lived. So this is Judith. So university, and just shortly after, I was into other sports essentially. But kept coming back to caving. It was always back to caving. There was something about the problem solving involved. And after university, I became a school teacher. So this is the biology lab that I had, or one of them from the schools that I taught in. And as a slight aside, the guy in the top is Lionel Fanthorpe. If you're into science fiction, you may have heard his name. He is the world's most prolific science fiction author, and still is today. We're back in the 1970s there, but today he is still listed if you look him up online, Lionel Fanthorpe. He produced just book after book after book, roughly one every 2 weeks. And he used that to pay himself to go through college. They're not the most exciting books. You get the feeling that he rabbited for a long time. Do you have that term, rabbited? Wrote forever, and then suddenly realised he'd got his word limit and he'd solve everything in 2 pages. Round about then, Dissent magazine was starting up. It was actually starting 1969, not by us, as a small publication in Britain. It went to a larger one in black and white, and then eventually to colour. And I used to write for Dissent. And this is Lionel Fanthorpe again. We took him, and you can see there, the relevance is, he was my headmaster. And we dragged him down this cave, and he got stuck a couple of times, and had a good time. And that's the sort of equipment that I was using in those days. And this is going to get relevant as well. You can see the flash gun there at the bottom, and the old Rolly. These are ex-army ammunition Lynx containers. So these were used in the Second World War for Lynx ammunition to go through machine guns. And you could buy them cheaply, and they were supposedly waterproof. You clamped down the lid, very heavy, but they did protect your kit. There were no such things as nice plastic boxes in those days. The relevance there is also that you could get bazooka tubes, ex-army bazooka tubes. It's a friend of ours, Nick. That's a bazooka tube over his shoulder. That was excellent for carrying tripods. So now you've got your cameras in an army ammunition container and a bazooka tube with your tripod. We're going to move to Galway in Ireland. This is the staging that was being produced by President Reagan, got it right, who was getting an honorary degree from the University of Galway. They built the staging for it. You can forget about the security measures. You knew exactly which route he was going to take to get to here because they painted it. You drove along and they painted the shops, they painted the road, they painted the posts and the lamppost. It was bright and clean. You turned 50 foot off this route and it was drab and dirty and painted. You knew where he was going to be. But he was coming here to get his degree. We were picking up a friend of ours who was essentially sleeping in one of the labs because he got nowhere to live, and we were going to go caving. Hugh managed to get all his kit packed in a bag, and he left it in the toilet. And off we set, and then realised he'd left it behind, but it's too late because the whole place by then has been locked up by the CIA. They're doing sweeps, and they found a bag. Not only that, they wondered why these strange people were there, disappearing, having left a bag. So they tailed us. We found out later that for 3 hours we'd been tailed by the CIA. That red van is a tinker's van. That was borrowed by the university, and that's typically what the IRA were using at the time. But we drew up in this wet road in the middle of the countryside, and I just dread to think what they were thinking, because this car came up. We thought, that's a strange car, they're here, and they paused and drove past slowly and looked at us, went up the road, turned round, came back, looked at us, went past, stopped and stood and looked at us. And we unpacked Lynx ammunition boxes, bazooka tube, put on some strange clothes, marched over a field and disappeared in a hole. This is the hole we disappeared into. It later on became Crank Cave, the show cave, and it is a very, very good cave to go to as a show cave. Then it was crawl through mud to get in here. But that trip to Ireland did give us the chance to get into some really nice caves. Here's the first of the black and white photos that you'll see coming up. And so black and white at that time was what I was really into. Anything that I could take, and though I shot colour, that tended to be because some people wanted colour for publication or whatever. I shot black and white because I just loved it. This one's got a story behind it. We were testing out different ways of lighting. There's a cave diver of those days. That was backlit by using a car headlamp. We got the car headlamp okay. We needed a battery to run it, so that was taken off someone else's car. I'm not that dumb. We dragged it in, ran this thing for the backlight, got the picture. Battery was flat. The other guy had quite a trouble getting his car started. This is one of our, I'll call it a local cave, about an hour from where we live now, Ogofalandi, which has got this marvellous streamway. It tends to be black limestone with heavy scallops. It's wet, it's wonderful. It's an absolutely superb place to be, to take photos. This has shifted over to Borneo, Mulan, and the Clearwater River. But you can tell I kind of like water, and the wetter the better. You get wetter. If someone's prepared to go and get wet for you, you can get pictures. Normally there's no water at this point in the cave. We just found it was pouring through the roof on a real rainy day, and able to get this. People do suffer for it. But if they're going to suffer, you might as well make them suffer for the sake of art, let's call it. You might be able to remember this one. There's another picture coming up later. If you've seen the prints in the salon, there's a black and white one there of Judith. This was taken the other side, looking the other way through this gap. A friend of ours, a photographer from Australia, David Stuck. And Tom. You'll be seeing more of Tom later with a camera. And obviously I'm taking loads of photos, and I ended up being approached, would I write a small book on cave photography? This is part of the layout and proofs and scribble out bits and change it, and that turned into the 1987 cave photography book as a little guide. That's not me on the cover, that's Gavin Newman, who went on to become incredibly famous in his own right for cave photography. I didn't want to be on the cover, I just wanted someone else, and he was it that time. He had a Nikon in his hand because he refused to hold my camera. He didn't want to be seen dead with a little rolly. The trouble is, the flash gun that I wanted him to have didn't fit, so that's why his fingers are in a funny place, because he's trying to hold the flash gun in place, because otherwise it'll fall in the mud. Something else I was doing during that whole period was research into early cave photographs, and we've got a brief excursion into images as they used to be. This is Porthorogoff, near where we live. It's got this beautiful big entrance that was drawn by some of the artists of the early 1800s. It's really quite accurate, some of those drawings, and yet other people just weren't accurate with it. This is 2 years after the last illustration. The river's flowing the wrong way, there's bunches of pirates, this is nowhere near the coast, it's just imagination. And to get round that, you needed photography. This is Fox Talbot, who invented the negative positive system that became international. And he was related by marriage to John Dilwyn Llewellyn, who also lived in, south of Wales. You had to build your camera, and he probably had the first instructions how to do this, because he was getting letters from his relative. And it meant that that is the first cave photograph that was ever taken, because he could trot down the coast, this is very near where he lived, and take a picture of the cave. That's the sort of equipment you needed at the time, though. You needed to make everything. You couldn't buy film, you couldn't buy glass plates. You made everything, and you had to do it on the spot. So to get one picture, you've got this lot. And you had to have a dark tent out on site to be able to process all this stuff. You had to process your picture within a few minutes, because ether was the base for the material on the plate, and that evaporated. Once it's gone, you couldn't get the developer into the emulsion. So everything was done on site. These guys are amazing. So you could get cave entrances, but it related to different people to use artificial lighting. This is Felix Nadar, who was a caricaturist, a balloonist. He took the first aerial photographs in the world. And he thought it would be rather a neat idea to go underground. This is the sewers in Paris. You could take boat rides. It seems to be the fashionable thing to do. You get ladies in crinoline dresses, go down in the sewers, get a boat ride. Those are arc lights being used, run from Bunsen batteries. There were also catacombs under Paris, where bones were stored. If you go to Paris now, you can take a tour through the catacombs. You just go through the door on the right, not the left, and you go underground, and here's the bones. These are all femurs stacked up with skulls to make patterns. And you can go for a walk through all this stuff. Here's Nadar with one of his pictures taken. So these are first artificial light pictures underground, though not in a cave. He had to use mannequins for his models because exposure times were about 20 minutes. This is real slow stuff. Magnesium came along. That was invented, or process developed, and this is a big deal. You'd have soirees. You'd have people just getting together so they could light the magnesium and get excited about how bright it was, even though if you opened the window, it was broad daylight. And this guy, Alfred Brothers, in 1866, went to this place, which is the Blue John Caverns in Peak District in England, and you can see there a candelabra that they used to haul up into the top of the cave so that the tourists could see what there was. And this was therefore the world's first cave photograph. And this stuff fascinated me, and especially the work of Charles Waldeck. So we're going to come now to Mammoth Cave. And Mammoth is where Charles Waldeck, shortly after the Civil War, came to take photographs in stereo, so these gave an illusion of 3D when they're viewed. With the two people on the left are Proctor and O'Shaughnessy, two people who had the rights to the cave and wanted photographs so that they could increase tourism to the cave. So Charles Waldeck from Cincinnati was involved. On the left there, you can see there is his magnesium burner. He'd hang strips of magnesium here, burn it, and the fumes would go out the top. They'd still fill the cave. Proctor and O'Shaughnessy on each side, Waldeck in the middle, and his stereo camera up there. And he was able to produce images like this. And I've got incredible admiration for Waldeck. This is a real pioneer working at the forefront of cave photography. He worked out many of the tenets that we use today. Get the flash, in his terms, the continuously burning lump of magnesium, get it away from the camera, and so on. He was taking long expeditions, 35 hours sometimes, to underground. You can see them having a proper meal there on a rock. And coping with the fumes. You can see the magnesium fumes just floating across there. And I just loved this stuff. It was a wonderful piece of research to be able to get into. And it was not until many years later, 1952, that we're at Carlsbad Caverns, and you've got many of these problem areas. What do you do about the fumes? You keep them inside a flash bulb. So this is one taken by Tex Hell at Carlsbad Caverns, and you can see there at the bottom, oh, sorry, pressed the wrong thing. It says, this took 2,400 bulbs. Wasn't messing around. Equally, think of Waldeck. He's burning a pound weight of magnesium when magnesium cost 4 times the price of silver. So even with this number of flash bulbs, it's got cheaper. Look how we can do it today with digital photography. It's become so much easier than the days of Waldeck or even Texel. This was shot, by the way, in April this year, during the wonderful time that Judith and I had, along with everyone else at the workshop in New Mexico. I'm going to introduce a few people as we skip through this. Mike and Emily, you must surely all know. Emily was instrumental in helping to get this published in the States. It was a dual publication in the UK and US. She had a copy of my manuscript for the history of all this and helped to get this published through University of Southern Illinois. So thank you to Emily there. Other people to say thanks to. This is Rob Palmer, British cave diver who lost his life diving in the Red Sea. That's an Arawak Indian skull in his hand that he's just brought up from a blue hole on Andros Island in the Bahamas. And that was an incredible experience. Rob said, would you come along and be the expedition photographer? Yeah, okay. We'll come to the Bahamas for 5 weeks. Yep. Then we had to go and learn how to dive. And this is Judith coming down the superb shaft of Stargate, where at noon you just get light penetrating right the way down. So I don't call myself a cave diver at all. This is, a bounce dive, down we go, get some photos, up we come. But descent at that time was changing. One of the directors of the company that owned it by then was leaving. They were restructuring. They were getting a new director, and I became editor, Judith assistant editor. So that's some of our first issues for Descent. Descent was being produced, though, very basically. People would send pieces of scrawled stuff on paper, and I'd have to redraw it. It was literally cut and paste days. You can see there on the left bits of paper pasted down to make an advert, and then instructions on the right where you wanted colour to appear. It was really quite basic in those days. You had photos, you'd send in the print and get it photographed to the same size so that it would drop onto the plate and then be copied. We were doing other work as well. I've got to say thank you to America for not having travelled to Cuba. And this is one of the beaches in Cuba. It meant that when they wanted photographs for the hotel chains, they came to Europe for the people to do it. So we got to go and take photos in nice hotels, work with models. So this is just some of the other stuff that we did in the interim, because let's face it, Descent does not earn very much money. It keeps going as a labour of love. But being able to supplement it with commissioned work like this, that helped immensely. And I've got to say, we were working with guests. The girl on the right there was one of the guests at the hotel, and you go say, would you like to be in photos? And she agrees. And then you've got to find someone to be with her. And you say to a bunch of guys, would you like to be in photos? No, don't want to do. And you say, well, it's with her. And there's this big splash as people go in. They didn't know each other. This is 5 minutes after they met. But it meant that you can end up in posters advertising resorts. This is another commission job that we had in South Wales. Funny way of structuring the picture. And I often have to do this because you need lots of space to overwrite for advertising. This was used for our national park advertising where they wanted to promote go for a walk in a cave. Natural history as well is something that I've always been into. This is bullfrog taken in Acadia. That was fun. I was lying down in the shallows and Judith's out in the water herding toads, bullfrogs, and I felt this funny feeling behind me, and there's a snake crawling across my legs. I don't know what, it went away. But natural history, being a biology teacher, is something that I've always enjoyed photographing. And that, the bats in Austin, and Death Valley. These are the sand dunes in the Namib Desert in southern Africa. These are supposed to be some of the tallest sand dunes in the world, starting from sea level and building up. And some of the Vlais, these are where the dunes of covered trees moved on and the dead trees are left standing. White sands, you, I'm sure, are going to recognise. And this was done at full moon this last April. So these sort of images came together when I ended up writing this book, Spice of Life, about biodiversity. Another one that I did, I was asked to produce a book, write a book for educational publisher. There were different editions. There was a US edition, UK edition. It was quite fun. It was very easy to write, very fast to produce. Spot the difference. It's been translated into Swedish, but if I go back, go back, there we are. You might notice the change in name for the author, as in there isn't one. I never knew that this had been produced. No one said that it had been published. We found out about it by chance. Had to chase down, hey, what's this thing? Why is my name removed from the title page, from the cover, from everything? Oh, we thought we could. Didn't think you might. It was because of that and some really awful editing in The Spice of Life that we set up Wild Places Publishing. So Judith and I started producing our own output. So Images Below was the next project. That was the 10-year research of the history of cave photography was done. Images Below was coming out as being a manual of cave photography. These are the prints. It amazed me how fast things were printed. I mean, that stack there are the pages for the colour section. That's about 2 minutes going through a press. It was incredibly fast. It stunned me how fast this could go through. So Images Below came out, and that was a colossal success for me, and it's had no end of feedback, and I'm very grateful for all the comments it's received. And it caused me to leave teaching. Up till then, I'm doing all this at the same time. Teaching had to go. The dumb bit went as in, oh, what am I going to do with life? Let's get rid of the bit that makes the money. And we took over Descent itself. So this is what Descent is like now. It's being produced much more efficiently, and I've now been editor, Judith co-editor, for 30 years, and 20 years ago we bought it. So it is now a totally in-house, written by cavers, for cavers, and we hope that lots of people enjoy it. Martin Farr, I went through at least part of college with him. We shared a flat. We produced 2 of his books, one on how to cave dive and one on where to cave dive. This is Jim Eyre, wonderful character, who was, at the one point he could be quite difficult, at another point he was just a gentle, wonderful person. And I swear that people will know one character, the other character, some people know both. And this is him signing some of his books with his superb cartoons that he'd just produce at incredible speed. So those are the 2 books that produced his autobiography that I am very proud to have produced. This is our latest book that we published by Dave Haig and John Cordingley, and more than anything this shows, I think, why we do this, because you get to see the author's face. This is more than just ink on paper. This is someone pouring their life into it, and the enjoyment that I get from seeing what it means to someone else to bring this to a page. That's incredibly important with this or Descent. Art Palmer. Oh gosh, we went to this cave, MacPhail's cave, turned up, and he said, "Oh, you need some SRT kit." Pulled out a bag of old bits of tat. It was bits of car seat, bits of rubbish, and he tied them together and made an SRT kit for us. So, thank you, Art, for giving us a good time, and of course Peg and Hazel, we know very well. There's Hazel in Breezeway that she took us into. John Woods we became very good friends with, and he's another superb photographer. And I've got to say, I stand here embarrassed at how many wonderful cave photographers there are here and around the world, and you've got me and Kevin Downey. There's Kevin messing around with a whole load of flash guns. It did mean that we've had the ability to travel the world, mostly self-funding, just going out, doing something. This is hiking in the desert of Zimbabwe, and you get to find these wonderful rock shelters. There's a spaceman up on the left. We're off to Borneo. We've got a series here of expeditions. This is Andy Evis, who runs all of these on the left. Every trip should start with a boat ride. I've got to say, this is a wonderful way to go caving. You get up, you get fed, you get in the boat, you get taken to the cave. This is Deer Cave. If you've seen the picture in the salons, I know some of you have because you've been talking to me. This is the entrance to Deer Cave, which is an amazing entrance. You just walk in. If any of you want to go there, it's just a superbly easy place to go. Pay your airfare, you can stay there, you get a guide, and you can go in Deer Cave. You've got no real sense of scale there, so there's another one with Judith standing there. And perhaps the classic view of Deer Cave looking out towards the entrance. This place is huge. The local caves there have got weird formations in places. Look at them. I don't understand fully how that formation came to be. Just wonderful wide roofs. This is Easter Cave, and not named for Easter, the holiday, but for Easter Island. This was a discovery during that expedition. White limestones. This is Drunken Forest Cave. You can guess why it's called that. And the Clearwater River. This can be really quite a raging torrent. It's nice and calm on this day. Jagged rock. You can see the person in the background using a rope to cross. It can be treacherous for currents. A friend of ours, Rue, you're going to meet him again later as well. And this wonderful notch that you get in the side of the river passage, which is in a characteristic of this cave. And the bats. Bats are wonderful there. They don't fly every night, just like the ones at Carlsbad, but they do stream out over the hillside. They're chased by bat hawks out on the right. And this picture was taken from inside the cave, so this is a wide-angle lens from the upper region of that entrance, and you can see the bats there snaking away through there as they disappear, and the other one was a telephoto shot. We'll head to India next. This is Meghalaya, up in the extreme north. You can see a little bit of India sneaks through there, comes out, and you've got this region of high plateau. It's cold. It was winter when we were there. And you can see the sort of start in the city. We were piling up all our stuff on the expedition truck. This is relevant because there wasn't room inside for all the camera bags and kit. I had all my cameras in a soft camera bag. We put it right on the top so it wasn't crushed by all the other kit. You go through a region of coal mining. They're crushing limestone like mad for cement. But unfortunately, the truck rolled. It didn't just fall on its side, it went 360 and then another 180. So at one point, it not only had all the kit, it had the truck on top of the camera bag, which survived. Everything survived. Even the beer. The important bits are being unloaded there. And interestingly, this is where we were staying. This is their football field. We've taken over this building, which is the school. This is the football field. And these are our tents. There happened to be a Google fly past while we were there. So you can find this on Google, and those are our tents. As I said, it was winter, it was cold. The locals would bring in a tree for us to burn. They typically dump a tree on the middle of the fire and let it burn through, and then you'd pull both ends in and keep going. It meant we could get into some incredibly explorable caves. So this was unusual. This is a band of coal through here. So it's coal directly above the limestone. And cave life. So these are threads produced by a fungus gnat larva, which is that. And they're sticky, so there's its prey. I'm sure you've all heard of snotites being the bacterial dribbly things, rubbery things. We had that term in Britain before you had snotites. We called them snotolites because they don't glow in the dark. No, snotolite. This was a find during the expedition. The place is just stacked full of caves, and we were lucky enough as well to be there as a photo team. Judith, me, a couple of others on this trip. This was original exploration where we were leapfrogging a survey team, and we were in front and found this, and that was good. That was the top edge of it, just climbing up the top. Getting photos, that's fun. If you're in deep water all the time with no ledges, what do you do with your box? And we got a local carpenter to make us a little raft out of bamboo so that we could unpack cameras. So this is how pictures got taken, weighed around, give people a flash gun in a polythene bag, and that was the resulting picture from that shot. So there's a flash gun. Anyone interested in this, there's a flash gun off around there. Judith's got an underwater light, and there's another backlight that she's holding in her other hand. So we've got an ambidextrous Judith. This is the wettest place on earth. So for part of it at least, we were camping inside a sports hall, partly for protection. It had its own weather system. It rained. It rained and rained. It came through the roof. This is Mark Berkey, an incredibly good cave photographer from Britain. So that river shouldn't have been there. It was heading into this cave and filled it full of mist, so at least you can get different effects then, backlighting mist. And getting at the bats. Sandstone as well, there's sandstone caves there. This is part of what is one of the longest sandstone-based caves in the world. It's got some designation that makes it the longest something. I forget what. But it's got these fascinating bands of black. They were supposed to be chemically tested while we were there, but someone brought the wrong sort of acid, so we couldn't. And this is back with underwater lighting. So the flash bulb chucked under the water to get a nice green glow coming through. Sometimes you get browns, sometimes it's greens. And even the caves have got their own weather system. You can see there the mist coming in from the right. So, off to Britain now. We do have some formations, although not many. This is in our longest cave, deepest caves, Ogofalandi, where again we've got this superb streamway. And it's, skipped one. And it's just wonderful for black and white photos. People keep asking me about these. So, here we have a series of black and whites. Just sheer fun of going caving. And in the course of doing all the scanning and finding photos and preparing them for this talk, I thought it was sort of fun to show this sequence of 12 black and white pictures. And that's the last of those 12, which I've got to say, it's wonderful doing cave photos. You take cave photos because you want them. You've got to. It's part of your blood in the end. You've got to take these things. And it's then incredible when other people say, hey, I like that. So I've got to say thank you for all the people that liked those 12. Those were all medal winners in previous salons. As was this. And that, I think, has had more feedback than any. And we have something back home about fun photos. We have a category in our salon for fun pictures. This is the equivalent in the UK of one of these events. Here you can see all the stands, and in the middle you've got the trade stands and the salons and the photos on display. So these are some of our prints that are then judged over the weekend. Well, one of the competition entries is for funny. It's judged by a laughometer. In other words, who gets the loudest laugh? So you have a nice title, and you interpret it. So meet Tom, who was wonderful at helping with doing these. This is our version of how to look after caves. Keep them clean. This is our version of what you don't do in caves. It's done with a sparkler. I guarantee there was about a foot behind the formation there. So no bits of calcite were harmed during the making of this movie. Formations need defending. I just love that one, I really do. And the last of this sequence, we did lots and lots of these. I know people in the photography section, they saw some more. These are all done on film. This is way before the time of digital, so these are done with printing in the dark room and double the exposures and so on. The projects that we've been doing this last year start here. This is Rue, who you saw in an earlier photo, with a laser scanner. He's one of the team that's been going around the world scanning large chambers. And here we're descending a shaft in the north of England, which is a disused mine that he was laser scanning to produce a 3D model. And all the old equipment is still down there, it's all flooded, none of it's working. And you can see him here scanning this old kit. And it produces something like this. This is a very low resolution output. He can produce things at much higher resolution that doesn't jerk around. That's my computer, not his production. And Judith and I were lucky enough to be asked to join with Rue to go to Laos early this year. So this is scanning Zabang Phai River Cave, and if you haven't seen it, go take a look at Dave Burnell's book about this in the NSS bookstore, because Dave did an incredible job of photographing this. There were just 4 of us here, 2 doing the scanning, Judith and me doing the photography. So that's Judith out on that promontory. Anyone else that we got to help tended to be the local guides. We can't speak their language, they don't speak ours, we're just waving arms and doing our best. But this is a huge cave. You can see Judith perched way up on there. And this was a really neat place to be. Again, every cave trip should start with a boat ride, and here it's all paddling in boats. It was a problem. Going back, it was a problem sometimes coordinating things. These are underwater bulbs as well as above water flash guns, but actually getting people to paddle at the right speed, right time, and so on, to get into place wasn't always easy. This is the upper entrance to the cave, or one of them. And then there was a separate cave that links in, that had got these formations. These aren't being done with bulbs, these are still being done with strobes. Those Metz flash guns really are, well, big, heavy, but so powerful. So we'll head to New Mexico and Carlsbad, perhaps a sort of shot of the entrance that isn't usual. So in April, we were lucky enough to be part of the International Cave Photographers meeting that met there. People were ever so kind. I mean, there's Rod I can see in the audience here who was good enough to facilitate getting into the cave after hours sometimes. So basically we had a ball, but of course there is white nose to deal with. From us in Britain, this is something kind of different. You've got to clean stuff, swab stuff, boil stuff, I don't know, everything stuff. You put things in bags. Now this bit, Judith especially said, she enjoyed this bit. You get all your clothes and give them to someone else to wash. That's real cool. But the whole principle seems to be that if it's been in a cave and you want to use it tomorrow, you put it in a bag to make sure that it's kept separate. Is that about right? So, one way of keeping your kit totally separate. We've got to say thank you as well then. Dan Lignini and Peter Jones, looking a bit tired there, for being the two of the incredible number of people and volunteers that made this happen. And, you know, guys, Americans, all pulled together to make this occur for a bunch of outsiders to come in and have a great time. So on behalf of all of them, I'll say thank you. This is a single underwater flash bulb and then a little bit of fill-in from a strobe. Wonderful salt caves, salt formations, gypsum formations. You've got some lovely things in here in the States. This is cottonwood. I'm sure this has been seen before and that's been shot before by other people, but it still pleased me. So we're back to where I started. My first cave picture. I have never been in a cave without a camera in my life. This is about the last photograph that was taken in April, so this is my most recent cave photo, and that's pretty much 50 years on. I've really had an enjoyable 50 years taking pictures of the underground. This is in France, north of England, France again. As is this. In a way that's eroding away and you've still got the drip there. I enjoyed that one. This is in India, Meghalaya. Back to the north of England and Gaping Gill once more. And one of our local very easy caves. And you get the hang of the fact that if it's dark, you can get a photograph out of it. You don't need to be somewhere exotic. You can get pictures in your local caves that are really quite simple. This is the reason that Easter Cave in Lulu is called it, because that formation struck the discoverers as being like one of the Maui formations. And I just love playing with things. These are bats flying from Blacken Cave. And the fact they're blurred just gives me a sense of speed, of wonder. This is in Slovenia, and although it looks a nice bright sunny day, which it was, the foreground was actually packed with flash guns as well. And the last picture, literally the last picture that was taken in Laos early this year. We just came back to the entrance to find this streaming in. So I have to say, thank you to everyone who's helped me create these pictures. And I've got to say, create, not take. Because everyone has input to these. Thank you to everyone that's helped. Thank you to everyone in here who has helped. And thank you to everyone here for being here and listening.
Thank you, Chris, for an enchanting presentation. This concludes the 2018 NSS Luminaries. We look forward to seeing you folks next year at the Luminary sessions in Cookeville, Tennessee. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Good job, Chris. Fabulous.
Good.